Season 8 of Game of Thrones destroyed any interest I had in this franchise. Almost a decade of storytelling completely wasted because of the laziness of two individuals. So when I heard that they were making a prequel, House of the Dragon, my first thought was,
I don't want it. I never have.
The marketing focused solely on the dragons, giving me no reason to expect much out of this show. But after watching the first 5 episodes, they've actually managed to do the impossible. They've managed to make me care. I never thought I'd be saying those words again. So I want to go through the first 5 episodes and explain why. It starts off 200 years before Game of Thrones, and 100 years after Aegon's conquest of Westeros. In the castle of Harrenhal, the same castle that we see Arya in Season 2. The lords have gathered for a council to decide the succession of King Jaehaerys. It came down to 2, Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, the king's eldest descendant, and her younger cousin Prince Viserys, the king's eldest male descendant. So we see Viserys wins and becomes the heir to the Iron Throne, and the show takes place 10 years into his reign. A fantastic first scene to set a great foundation for the show. Yet they decide to use Daenerys' theme song and show a dragon riding right over King's Landing in the next scene. Why the hell are you trying to remind me of Season 8?
And if he's right, if she has a son, a Targaryen at the head of a Dothraki army, what then?
We're introduced to Rhaenyra Targaryen coming back from a ride on her dragon Syrax. And we're also introduced to Alicent Hightower, Rhaenyra's best friend and daughter of the Hand of the King. We see Rhaenyra and Alicent walk hand in hand through the courtyard, the same one that Cersei Lannister used in the later seasons to paint her map. We get a strong sense of Rhaenyra's position in the world when we see her talk to her mother, who explains that the birthing bed is women's battlefield and they must do their duty, and Rhaenyra expresses that's not the life she wants, making it clear from the very beginning what type of character this is going to be. We get a really touching scene with Aemma and Viserys, where Aemma discusses that this 5th attempt at having a child is her last and she can't take it anymore. We get our first politics scene and we get introduced to the members of the King's Council. Corlys Velaryon, the Master of Ships, Lyman Beesbury, Master of Coin, Malos, Grand Maester, Lionel Strong, Master of Laws, and Otto Hightower, the Hand of the King. Corlys Velaryon complains there's an alliance that is formed in the Free City and they are obstructing his trade routes, only to be ignored by Otto and the King. We get a clear sense of the power dynamic of all the players in the room, even Rhaenyra's position as the cupbearer. After finding out her uncle's return, Rhaenyra goes to visit him, and we get introduced to Damon Targaryen, who was famous for his portrayal as the Doctor in Doctor Who. One of the few actors that I was excited to see going into the show, and he did not disappoint. Not to mention, I love the look of the Iron Throne. They have a conversation in Old Valyria, and he gives her a necklace. We get a scene with Rhaenyra and Alicent that clearly highlights the difference between them, where Alicent is much more of a lady that's interested in performing her duties, and Rhaenyra just wants to ride her dragons and eat cake. We see Viserys' flesh is rotting away from an unknown illness, as the maesters tend to his wounds.
Whatever it is, it needs to be kept quiet.
Apparently, Otto suggested to Viserys to make Damon Lord Commander of the City Watch to keep him out of their way. Damon made the most of this position that was only given to him as a distraction, and as the founder of the Gold Cloaks that we see throughout Westeros in Game of Thrones. We see them do a sweep throughout King's Landing, getting all the murderers and rapists they can find, publicly punishing them to make an example to all the other criminals in King's Landing, making sure to clean up all the rats before the lords come to Westeros. In the next scene, we clearly see that Otto has a major issue with Damon's approach to the law. Corlys doesn't seem to have a problem with it, understanding that fear is an important part of ruling. Oddly enough, we don't get Lionel Strong's opinion because he is cut off by Otto. And Viserys is neutral to the entire thing, understanding that there's purpose behind it but doesn't want him slaughtering everyone in his city. We get a sense of a long history of hatred with Otto and Damon as he assaults his late wife. As strong as Damon comes off in these scenes, we still see that he's extremely conflicted as he's not able to perform or get the situation off his mind, even while having sex. Because Damon knows that if Aemma gives birth to a son, he will no longer be the heir to the Iron Throne. We get a glorious tournament scene highlighting how broke Robert actually was in King's Landing, when his looks like he spent $40 on it, compared to the wealth of the Targaryens in their prime.
I'll have to borrow it. The Lannisters will accommodate, I expect. We already owe Lord Tywin 3 million gold. What's another 80,000?
Are you telling me the crown is 3 million in debt?
I'm telling you the crown is 6 million in debt.
How could he let this happen?
I've been sitting here for days! Start the damn joust before I piss myself.
Damon is participating in the tournament, and this prick chooses Otto Hightower's son as his first opponent, just to piss him off. And then he flirts with his daughter to throw salt on the wound. We see Damon as not only a skilled warrior, but a ruthless one, willing to cheat just to get a victory. Because who's gonna say anything to a Targaryen? Otto gets news from the Maester that Emma is having issues with the pregnancy, and Viserys rushes to her aid. And he makes the horrible decision of cutting her open. This is how badly he wants an heir. And we get an incredible scene cutting back and forth between the fight and the pregnancy, contrasting the women's battlefield from the men's battlefield, just like Emma said. Damon loses the fight to the underdog Crispin Cole, as Emma dies from blood loss, but the baby is saved. You can clearly see that he loved her, and this was not an easy decision for Viserys, which makes it all the more tragic when we find out that not only did he lose Emma, but the baby as well. We get a better understanding for the pressure that Viserys is under, after seeing everyone on the council immediately trying to discuss politics while he's still mourning his family, and we see him snap, similar to what Tywin did in Season 1.
On an heir, then how can we
My
expect
wife
a
and
ramble?
son are dead! I will not sit here and suffer crows that come to feast on their corpses!
Can't afford to look weak.
We should march on them at once.
First, we must return to Casterly Rock to raise
They
more.
have my son!
Get out, all of you.
Otto Hightower tells Alicent to comfort the king, trying to take advantage of his current state and position Alicent to be his next wife. Damon celebrates in his own way, essentially throwing an entire orgy for his men, as he sits in the middle, fully dressed, drinking. And we find out from Otto about a speech that Damon made, calling Viserys' dead son the heir for a day. Damon doesn't deny it, and he tells Viserys the truth, that he's weak. And we also see that he gets a cut on his hand from the throne, hinting that not only is he not worthy of the throne, but also that the hand of the king is corrupt. Viserys tells Rhaenyra about the prophecy that has drove him mad this entire time, and apologizes for neglecting her all these years, focusing solely on having a son. And he decides to make her his heir.
Aegon the Conqueror invaded Westeros not just for power, but because he had a vision that the Targaryens were needed to unite and rule Westeros and save the world of the living. No one else could do it.
So Rhaenyra goes from wanting to chill and eat cake to ruling an entire kingdom and having the destiny of defeating the White Walkers. Great. Episode 2 takes place 6 months later, and we get to see the intro for the first time, a model city, just like the one Viserys is making. We see Corlys once again suggesting that they go to war, something that Viserys desperately wants to avoid and suggests other tactics, while Rhaenyra says they should just use the dragons and make a statement. We find out that Viserys and Alicent's conversations have been ongoing, and we get a scene where he drops the dragon statue, foreshadowing the fall of the Targaryen. So even though Alicent is a ploy from Otto, she also lost her own mother, so it's much easier for her to come off as sympathetic and understanding Viserys' situation. And their mutual grief gives them a bond, at least in Viserys' eyes, as he tells her to keep these conversations between her and he doesn't want Rhaenyra to know. The king is being pressured to remarry as Corlys asks him to marry his daughter. And after meeting her, it's clear that this is going to be very difficult for him to get over the age difference. But through their conversation, they actually happen to mention that Vhagar, the largest of the Targaryen dragons, is missing. Nobody actually knows where it is. And Damon, apparently, has taken all the gold cloaks to Dragonstone and claimed himself the heir to the Iron Throne. And he also stole one of the dragon eggs from the hatchery. And to make matters worse, the egg he stole was Rhaenyra's brother's, the heir for a day. Viserys snaps after finding out this insult, but Otto stops him, implying that he can't allow it. So we see Otto approach Damon at Dragonstone and have a confrontation. But there's not much he can do once Damon's dragon shows up. Let's take a second to talk about how amazing this thing looks. I actually really do appreciate the different designs of the dragons. As someone who had no desire to have dragons shoved down my throat, thinking that that was all this show was going to be, I'm actually very impressed with how much control and restraint they've showed, as instead of shoving them into every scene, they focus on character instead.
And leave Dragonstone by order of his grace King Viserys.
Where is the king? I don't see him.
Damon seems upset that Viserys didn't come personally, and he clearly just did this to get attention. But Rhaenyra shows up and steals both their thunder. And Damon makes it clear that he doesn't want to hurt his family in this scene, as he gives back the egg, after Rhaenyra calls his bluff. Dragonstone is traditionally the seat to the heir to the Iron Thrones. So by taking Dragonstone, he's essentially taking Rhaenyra's castle. I love the parallel of Mysaria being a slave and found her way out, just like Melisandre. And Stannis and Damon are both second sons who want the respect of their older brother. Not to mention that they both took refuge at Dragonstone.
My house that my beloved brother Robert left.
He wasn't my beloved brother. I didn't love him. He didn't love me.
A harmless courtesy, Your Grace.
A lie. Take it out.
Viserys asks Lionel Strong for unbiased advice, and he suggests Corlys Valerian's daughter, to strengthen the realm and bind the two strongest houses. But Viserys decides to marry for love instead, pissing off everyone from Corlys to Rhaenyra to Damon. Well, Otto's cool with it, of course. This encourages Corlys to meet with Damon to discuss an alliance, as he considers them both second sons that need to prove themselves in the world, similar to people like Oberyn and Tyrion who have nothing to inherit, so have to find a different path for themselves. Daenerys even had an army that was made up entirely of second sons. We get a clear understanding of how much they want to progress the story as episode 3 takes place 3 years later, as we see Damon on his dragon, calling for the crab feeder, burning the front lines. And Viserys has planned a boar hunt to celebrate Aemon's 2nd birthday. George R.R. Martin famously hated the boar scene in Game of Thrones. It was his most hated scene. A king's hunt is supposed to be a glorious event, not 4 guys trucking through the fucking wilderness. I still like it because it's completely in line with Robert's character, considering he wanted to get the kill himself. But this is a much more accurate portrayal of what a king's hunt would be, so kudos to them. Viserys is clearly trying to enjoy himself, but the burden of politics never seems to leave him, as the political vultures pry at him from every angle. Otto is being pressured by his older brother to ensure that Aemon becomes the heir to the throne. We also meet the Lannister twins, Jason and Tywin Lannister. Jason is Lord of Casterly Rock, and Tywin is the new Master of Ships to replace Corlys. We get to meet Lionel Strong's sons, Harwin and Larys. Harwin is the strongest knight in Westeros, nicknamed Breakbones, and Larys is nicknamed Clubfoot because of the deformity he was born with. Rhaenyra forces a bard to be her personal MP3 player as she reads her book. The book and the song are about Nymeria, an ancient warrior princess that she's a fan of, the same one that Arya named her wolf after. And in the same spot that we saw them hang out together earlier, now we see the conflict and how distant they are, as Queen Alicent tells the bard to leave and overrules Rhaenyra, who wanted him to stay. And Rhaenyra, even though she is the heir, sits in a carriage as everyone cheers on baby Aegon. We see her take no interest in mingling with the lords, unlike Alicent, who knows how to be a proper lady and play the game. Viserys and Rhaenyra have a big fight right in front of all of them, and Rhaenyra snaps and rides away. Jason Lannister tries to impress Viserys with a weapon he made for him, a beautiful spear. But Viserys is drunk and had enough of the vultures, after Jason mentions that Aegon will be heir over Rhaenyra. Viserys shits all over him, and it seems like every time a king roasts a Lannister, it's just amazing.
Lancel.
Gods, what a stupid name.
You let that little girl disarm you.
Surrounded by Lannisters. Every time I close my eyes, I see their blonde hair and their smug, satisfied faces.
And then directly after this, Otto suggests that he marries Rhaenyra to Aegon. Can you guys just leave this guy alone, you fucking vultures? Get away from him. Let the man chill. Let him drink his wine. Lionel approaches him now, and Viserys has had enough, assuming that he's going to suggest his son. Lionel seems to be one of the only reliable people who isn't solely interested in his own rise to power. So he suggests Laenor to strengthen the houses. Cole followed Rhaenyra after seeing her ride out into the forest, and we see them discuss their positions in life. And she complains about how much she hates being queen and how trapped she feels. Yet he reminds her that with this position that she takes for granted, she changed his life, and he'll never forget that. They get attacked by a boar, and Cole impales it, saving her life. And then Rhaenyra takes out all her frustration and stabs the life out of the boar. And we see the amazing imagery of blood-soaked Targaryen hair. Something I'm shocked they actually never did in Game of Thrones. And it's interesting that earlier she said that dying boars squeal like children, followed by Aegon yelling out. So you can almost imagine she was picturing him right at that moment. Viserys expresses his conflict to Alicent by the fire and tells her all about the dream he had and part of the reason he's so possessed to have an heir. And we find out that the rumor of the White Hart was false, just a regular deer. And you can clearly see that Viserys is relieved. There's no signs, no omens. He made the right decision about Rhaenyra. Yet he's still seemingly uneasy about killing the deer, as it's tied and pulled from every direction, just like Emma was in episode 1. And unlike Rhaenyra, who unleashed her fury on that boar, Viserys makes an awful scene as he struggles to land a killing blow. The White Hart appears to Rhaenyra, and she decides to leave it, making a statement by bringing the boar back instead. And I find this really interesting, because her killing the White Hart might have been something that she could have used as leverage for herself, but she chose not to. One of the few things that are completely vague in these first few episodes. We see Viserys and Alicent having a conversation, and we find out that his fingers have been amputated. Apparently Daemon's battle was going very poorly, and Viserys does not want to look weak by helping him. But Alicent suggests that he keeps his feelings out of it and does the right thing. In a conversation with Rhaenyra, Viserys admits that he married for love, so it's only fair that she can too, and says that she can pick a mate, expressing how important it is for her to marry for the strength of the realm, but also wants her to be happy and is going to let her choose. We see Corlys and his men arguing that they're running out of food and supplies as Damon walks up and gets Viserys' letter from the messenger. He reads it, doesn't say a word, and just snaps and starts smashing the messenger. And we can clearly take this as a sign of frustration, knowing that Damon does not want his older brother coming and stealing his glory, which results in the next scene. And one of the things I love the most about a battle scene is a battle that is focused on the character. It's not just happening to show dragons and have a battle for the sake of a fight scene. This is much more about Damon's character. The fact that he is now willing to risk everything to make sure that he gets the glory. This is about him. They started this war to spite Viserys. And now the idea of Viserys coming and taking over for him is something he can't live with. It makes it much easier to justify such a risky position like this. Win or die. We see him use himself as bait to braid out the crab feeder and his army, only to be flanked by the dragon and Corlys' men. And we get the epic fantasy shot of Damon walking out with the crab feeder's decapitated corpse. And for all the people who said they'd prefer to have seen a battle, I think it makes a much more powerful statement watching Damon walk out like this. There's no actual threat to the Targaryens. The only thing that can take down the dragon is itself, like they said in the opening scene. The entire situation with the crab feeder was much more about Damon's character, and that's what I love about it. And we see Damon soaked from head to toe in the crab feeder's blood. And I love the comparison between Damon, Viserys, and Rhaenyra in this episode, as all three of them had a challenge before them. And we see it handled in three completely different ways. Episode 4 starts off with Rhaenyra on tour, trying to find a proper match, with a whole host of suitors before her, lined up like cattle. The first suitor is like 1,000 years old, from House Dondarrion, the same family as Beric Dondarrion in Game of Thrones. This guy is so old, he mentions that he met her great-grandmother, something that she mocks him for. And then the other kid looks like he's 5 years old, a young boy from House Blackwood, who gets roasted by the crowd and laughed at by Rhaenyra until he snaps and kills his taunter, and Rhaenyra has had enough and leaves. Oh my goodness. Considering the way we're using timelines, I'm almost 100% positive that this guy, we're going to see him in the future, and this must have been setting up something significant. So remember all the details in this scene. We see Damon return and offer the crab feeder's hammer and tells him to add it to the chair, just like Barristan Selmy did.
Here, boy. Melt it down and add it to the others.
We finally get to see them forgive each other and act like brothers, reminisce about their past. We also see Rhaenyra and Alicent reconnect after Alicent admits how lonely it is being queen. Rhaenyra is also no longer the cupbearer and has a seat at the council, so Viserys is giving her much more respect and allowing her to have a better understanding of what it means to rule. We find out that Corlys Velaryon plans to wed his daughter to the son of the Sea Lord of Braavos, the same city that Arya went to in Season 5. Damon leaves a message and a disguise for Rhaenyra, and encourages her to use the same tunnel system that we see Varys use to sneak out Tyrion. We also see Damon use this earlier to spy on the council. He takes her out, and in her disguise she finally gets to see what freedom feels like, as nobody recognizes her. And we see a play, and she gets a better idea of what she's up against. She runs away, only to bump into Harwin Strong. But once he sees Damon, he lets her go, as all the Gold Cloaks are loyal to Damon. He takes her to a brothel and purposely removes her hat. And I find this interesting because he's the one who gave her the disguise, and she kept it on the entire night. But this is when he decides to take it off. I feel like that implies that he wanted her to be seen here specifically. While this is happening, Alicent is summoned in the middle of the night, and we see the lifeless, passionless sex that these two are having, as Viserys essentially uses her as a baby maker to further his ambitions. And Alicent has had enough, as something that Viserys notices, and we get a shot of the rats above her bed. Damon tries to seduce her, but is actually thrown off by how down she is. But this results in Rhaenyra's rampage, where she manipulates poor Cole, who just wants to do his duty. She seduces him, drags him into the room for sex. Damon released the beast, but didn't satisfy it, so Cole has to finish the job. She rips off his armor, having no respect for his uniform, but he refuses to let her do the same with his cloak, as he takes a second to fold and put down, clearly showing that this is something that means a lot to him, and he's taking a big risk here. And we see her lose her virginity to Crispin Cole. Damon wakes up extremely hungover, after probably trying to drink that whole situation out of his mind. He finds out that Massaria is no longer a whore, but she's a spy. And the same kid that saw them in the brothel works for her, and told Otto. Otto has played all his cards perfectly so far, slowly moving every piece on the board. He fucked up way too hard on this one. You don't mess with the king's daughter. You just don't. And he decides to tell Viserys about Damon and Rhaenyra's meeting. And Viserys snaps, realizing in this moment just how far Otto is willing to go to further his own ambitions and lower his daughter's name. Alicent hears this whole conversation and confronts Rhaenyra, who then swears on her mother's life that she's still a maiden, and Alicent wants to believe her friend, and tells Viserys that it's not true. Viserys confronts Damon, who doesn't even deny it, because even though he didn't sleep with her, the impression is all that matters. Then that could possibly ruin her potential with getting married to any of the other lords, and that would open up the door for Damon, and he knows this. He even has the nerve to tell Viserys to wed Rhaenyra to him, and he ends up just getting stomped on and banished. Viserys tells him to go back to the Vale, back to his wife. And then he talks to Rhaenyra and tells her to stop fucking around. Her feelings aren't as important as the stability of the house, and reminds her of the dream and the destiny that she has as a Targaryen, showing her the dagger. Viserys has had enough of the politics and Rhaenyra's antics, and he tells her that she's marrying Laenor Velaryon, and she agrees, under the condition that he gets rid of Otto, as he is clearly corrupt. Which leads to a fantastic scene, which shows how good a king Viserys can be, as he connects the dots that Otto has been corrupt this entire time. His father's suspicious death is actually what made Otto Hand of the King in the first place, and he understands how conveniently timed Alicent's presence was, basically a revelation for Viserys. Otto abused his grief and used his daughter to further himself, and now it's came back to bite him. And he doesn't have the words of Littlefinger. He doesn't have the power of Tywin. He runs out of things to say and gets completely run over by Viserys. The episode ends with the Grand Maester bringing Rhaenyra a tea. Basically the plan B pill for Westeros, so she won't have any unwanted consequences. At the beginning of episode 5, we're finally introduced to the Bronze Bitch, Daemon's wife. We get some beautiful shots of her riding the horse. And according to Shadiversity, this is one of the best depictions of leather armor he's ever seen in any fantasy setting. After taking a second to realize why he's here, she reaches for her bow, and the horse panics, throwing her to the ground and breaking her back. He goes to test her arm to see if she actually has any feeling in it, and it finishes her off with a rock. And she doesn't go out without a fight. She talks all the shit she can before she dies. Roast him into oblivion. And what I find most fascinating about this scene is a clear example of show don't tell. A show that actually rewards you for paying attention, as Rhaenyra was told that she stunk of dragon in episode 1. So clearly Damon, who would have had to ride a dragon to get into position, would stink of dragon as well. A detail that actually elevates the scene if you pay attention. It's one of the things I love most about good writing. We see Viserys with his new hand, Lionel Strong, traveling to meet Corlys Velaryon to propose the marriage. And we get a sad scene as Otto leaves King's Landing and talks to Alicent, telling her the harsh reality of the situation she's in. Otto, just like Tywin, he knows the game. He knows where this will lead, and he understands that Rhaenyra will have to put Alicent's kids to the sword if she wants to rule. So she has to decide what she wants to do now. And this is all the more sad that he put her in this position. Viserys is so sick that he struggles just being in the carriage, and they've done an incredible job of wearing him down over these 5 episodes. And rather than a grand welcome like Robert got from the Starks when he went up to Winterfell, the place is empty. We get a scene with Lionel's son, Larys, talks his way into revealing that Rey received a tea from the Grand Maester to Alicent, dropping a bombshell on her. So we get one scene of Lionel defending the king's honor, and another scene with his son planting a seed in the queen's head. Interesting. What the hell is the Strong family up to? They're the one family that we have no idea what they want. Corlys makes Viserys take a long journey to meet him in his hall as he sits on his throne and waits for him. And Viserys is a sweaty, coughing mess, as Corlys notices as he kneels to the king. He proposes the marriage, and they agree under the condition that their firstborn son will inherit the throne, and it'll be under the name Targaryen. And at the same time, Rhaenyra and Laenor make a deal, making it clear that they'll do their duty for the realm. Once that's done, they can both do whatever they want. Something that works perfectly for Laenor, as we find out in the next scene that he's gay, and it's basically an open secret. And then we get the scene that broke my freaking heart, as Cole gets the harsh reality check that Rhaenyra doesn't give a fuck about him. She completely used this guy, and he sullied his cloak, destroyed the one thing that gave his life meaning, for her. because he thought it meant something more. This guy is madly in love, and we have to watch him completely pour his heart out, offer to have them run away. And she says, no, bro, I've got a career. Like, completely shits on this guy. And thank you, Cole, for having a pair of balls and actually calling her out for it. Cole clearly doesn't understand how the game is played. Rhaenyra grabbed the first piece of flesh she can find, and it just happened to be Cole. Alicent notices that the king collapses on his way back to King's Landing, and takes this opportunity to question Cole. And we get a very interesting scene where they both basically have two different conversations at once, as he is the one who spends the most time with Rhaenyra, so it's the best person to question, trying to find out if the situation with Damon is true or not. And Cole is under the impression that she's talking about him. He's completely heartbroken and overwhelmed with guilt, and he panics and tells the truth, revealing a bomb to Alicent, who had no idea that this was even part of the equation. She was here to question him about Damon, and finds out that not only is the Damon thing now up in the air, but she's been fucking Crispin Cole. She might be a complete whore. She has no idea what to do with this, completely overwhelmed, and just tells him to leave. Crispin, on the other hand, is picturing himself being tortured right now and is just trying to lesser his sentence. He has no idea what he's even getting himself into. And we get a sad scene with Viserys showing how terrible of a shape he's in, as his arm is almost completely rotten. And we overhear the young Maester suggest a herbal medicine, only to be brushed off by the Grand Maester. Viserys talks to Lionel about his regrets as king, and wondering how he will be remembered. And it's moments like this that make me really appreciate this character, as he tries so hard to keep his house in order as his body is completely falling apart. The wedding celebrations begin, the Lannisters are introduced, the High Towers are giving an entrance, and then a grand entrance for the Valerian family, and their wigs. And then, even though he just got banished, Damon waltzes his ass right through the crowd, walks right up to the table. What you gonna do about it, Viserys? Say something. Knowing that Viserys is definitely not gonna cause a scene at his daughter's wedding in front of the other lords, and is just gonna be forced to take it. What a fucking prick. I love him. And if we haven't had enough glorious entrances, Alicent releases her inner Cersei Lannister and makes a grand entrance in a beautiful green dress, making a statement to all the other lords. And then as she approaches the table, she gives Rhaenyra a fucking death stare. Look at this thing. Holy shit. Alicent has really come into her own in these last two episodes, and the drama between them is fantastic. Laenor and Rhaenyra do the ceremonial dance, and Laenor mentions that dancing is a lot like fighting, referencing the dance of the dragons, an omen for things to come. While all this is happening, we're getting looks from everyone in the room. All the pieces are moving. We see Damon confronted by Sir Gerald Royce, the cousin of his late wife, who basically accuses him of killing her. And Damon doesn't give a fuck. Tells him to piss off, and says basically that his wife's land's and inheritance now belongs to him, and he'll roll up on his dragon to come claim it. This is how you use the dragons. This is how it should be done. You don't need them in every single scene. Damon's words are enhanced by the fact that he owns the dragon. Every little fucking scene with this guy is just all the more threatening when you know the potential of him rolling up on your doorstep with a fucking dragon. The dragons loom over every scene without actually being there. This is how it's done. And then Joffrey, Laenor's boyfriend, the Knight of Kisses, does the stupidest thing he's ever done in his entire life. After confirming that Rhaenyra also has someone on the side, they're curious to find out who it is. And at the same time, Crispin Cole has a death stare, unable to hide his emotions, so they can clearly see it must be him. And he makes the mistake of mentioning this to Cole, someone who is literally losing his shit right now, potentially suicidal, as we see from the end of this episode, and has no idea what to do with himself. This is not a stable man. But from his position, it makes sense, because Joffrey sees a Kingsguard who's fucking a princess and assumes he's all in. He's totally okay with being a whore. This was a situation of saying, hey bro, we're all together in this, you're just like me. But we know Cole feels the complete opposite of this. That's the craziest thing about it. It all lines up. And in one of the craziest parts of the episode, Damon rolls right up to Rhaenyra and they have their intimate conversations in Old Valyrian. Basically their way of talking in private. Damon mentions that his marriage was recently dissolved, and Rhaenyra teases him, saying that he's clearly armed. If you want her, take her to Dragonstone and marry her. Go cut down my father's Kingsguard. And I have no idea if this bitch was bluffing, if she was serious, if she was... Who knows what's going on with these Targaryens? And we don't get any answer to this, because a fucking fight breaks out 2 seconds later. Nobody knows who started this fight. I don't know if it was Damon, I don't know if it was set up, and they clearly don't want us to know. But then what we end up seeing is Cole beating the shit out of Joffrey, smashing his face in, silencing the secrets. You talk too much shit, buddy. What the fuck were you thinking? We see Lionel Strong give a signal to his son, Harwin, to go grab Princess Rhaenyra, and he just bulldozes his way through the crowd. As it cuts to Cole screaming like a madman, bashing Joffrey's face into putty. Holy shit, this guy completely loses his mind. The night is completely ruined as Laenor looks and sees his lover's face bashed into a puddle. And they literally cancel it, send everybody home, and say fuck it. They do the wedding right there in front of the table. Crispin Cole, seemingly a lost man, goes out into the Godswood to try to commit suicide. And he's stopped by Alicent, who finds him just in time. We also see Viserys completely pass out. This man's deterioration has just been insane. And the episode ends with a shot of a rat drinking Joffrey's blood. And that's basically the first 5. An incredible job so far. I'm blown away by how much of an understanding they have for what made the first few seasons of Game of Thrones work. The blending of fantasy and politics and drama, and the focus on characterization so we can actually be invested in these people. I really truly thought that this was just going to be the dragon show. Oh, this show's going to have 17 dragons. Oh, look at this dragon, look at that dragon. No, they actually know what they're doing. And this is completely shocking for me as someone who was done with this world. But again, the saddest part is, no matter how much I'm enjoying it, no matter if they continue the seasons on and they actually, they nail those two, all roads lead to Bran the Broken, the fucking cunt who did nothing for the entire series of Game of Thrones and then became king. So I will forever be bitter about season 8, but my love for this franchise has been renewed from just these 5 episodes. It just reminded me of why I really cared about it so much. I really hope that this time skip doesn't fuck everything up. Probably the most important and risky time skip I've ever seen in anything. I hope they continue the quality and the emphasis on character. I know the next few episodes or the rest of the season is going to be more focused on action since it's a time skip, but let's just hope that they're not rushing to that. Just make sure that the action still has some meaning. I'm craving the same type of substance I've had in these first 5 episodes, so let's really hope that this ship doesn't fall off the rails like it did in season 8. But apparently this is a whole new crew. Dan and Dave are long gone, and this team seems to have an understanding of what needs to be done to rebuild the trust of the fan base. And I'm all on board. So let's see what they can do with this show. I'm probably going to end up doing a review for the next 5 episodes, maybe in the same format. We'll see how this goes. This has been really experimental. I normally do full scripts that take ages to get through. It's part of the reason it takes me forever to release videos. But this was something that was really important to me, and I want to make sure I get it out as fast as possible. I'm working on a Jurassic World critique. That movie was a fucking abomination. You'll see that soon. The script is done. I'm also working on a new format to basically be able to talk about movies in a more positive light. So introducing a top 5 format to my channel. And probably the first one I'm going to go through would be my top 5 survival films, one of the genres I'm really fond of. So, see you guys soon. Hope you enjoyed this. Take care. Peace.